So, what were some of your initial thoughts when you first heard of the attacks on Saturday?
Well, the single biggest deal is that this should have been detected. Hamas is the group that the Israelis are most concerned about monitoring. And in theory, they have them shot through with plenty of human intelligence gathering operations. And of course, it's right on their border. So signals intelligence should be pretty good. And the idea that you could have conservatively 500 fighters, probably closer to 1,000, cross the border in a surprise assault that from 20 different vectors using a half a dozen different transport methods, and none of it was detected before it went down. That is an intelligence failure that is just colossal. This isn't like 9/11, where it was some fringe group using a novel method of attack. These are all known factors. And for the Israelis to miss this, I mean, at a minimum, this is going to cause the downfall of the government, which a lot of people probably think is not all that bad of a thing. But it's definitely going to cause a complete top to bottom overhaul of how the Israelis do everything, just like it did the last time something like this went down 50 years ago when the Israelis reformed their intelligence systems in the aftermath of the Yom Kippur War and became the world standard. So somehow, somewhere in the last 20 years, it's all fallen apart. And it makes you wonder what else they're missing.
Hmm. I mean, there's some parallels to us after the Cold War, relying more on signals type intelligence, technical type intelligence, rather than human type intelligence.
Right,
That
and there's pros and cons of each method, but the foes that the United States is primarily concerned about are in a different hemisphere. So you can understand why signals intelligence forms a stronger pillar for us. Gaza was right there.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you felt this way or not, or if this is your assessment or not, that the Israeli intelligence services in particular had a kind of aura of not invincibility, but a outreach, a mystery, a
Absolutely.
mystique. That they were embedded in Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran through agents, spies, proxy groups, even that has been shattered perhaps with this latest incursion.
I mean, again, we don't have any information. The most logical conclusion today, which might be proven wrong tomorrow, is that it's a new faction within Hamas because there's dozens of them, and it could just be a new one that popped up and somehow managed to recruit several hundred people.
Mm.
Even that doesn't hold together very well.
Yeah. And so, more geopolitically, when we talk about U.S., Israel, and Saudi, and an agreement that I don't know on the brink is the right word, but or the right terminology, but working through normalization of relations in exchange for possibly increased oil production, decreased oil prices, and maybe some military support also for Saudi in a kind of a reorganization of the order in the Middle East. How much did that play into what happened over the weekend?
If I was a guessing man, I would say that that was the primary rationale for the timing, if not the attack itself. Definitely for the brutality as well. You're looking at things that Hamas has now done in the last week that even ISIS never got around to doing in terms of just the human denigration. And so it's going to be very, very difficult for the folks in Riyadh to still proceed to cut a deal with Israel. Now, for those of you who don't like live and breathe this area, quick primer. There are lots and lots and lots of factions across the Middle East, but there's really four that matter. You've got the Turks, different ethnicity, but Sunni Muslim, semi secular. You've got the Sunnis, which Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Egypt, that's the dominant group, Sunni Arabs. The third group are the Israelis, the Jews, and then the fourth are Shia Persian. So different religious sect, different ethnicity, and that's Iran. And what has been going on for the last, let's call it a decade, but really intensely started in the second year of the Trump administration, was a normalization of the relationship between the second and the third factions. The Sunni Arabs that make up the vast majority and the vast majority of the economy, and then the Jews who have the technology and the relationship with the United States. And the idea was that if you can get those two factions on the same side, then the rest of the Middle East will more or less take care of itself. Now, there are any number of ways that you can manage the Middle East. This is one. I'm not saying it's better or worse than any particular one, but this is the one that the Biden and the Trump administrations broadly agreed on behind closed doors. They will never say that out loud, but it's a by administration strategy. And the United Arab Emirates and Morocco have already gone down that path. And the question was whether Saudi Arabia, the biggest, the most powerful, the richest of the Sunni states, would follow. And within Riyadh, there is a familial argument. I mean, we all know about those intergenerational arguments we have at family reunions, where all the aunts and the uncles and the parents are on one side and all the cousins and the kids are on the other side. And it doesn't matter how old you are, those arguments really don't change. Well, for the older generation, the defining characteristics of the Arab identity is that the Palestinians are Arabs too. And so any sort of deal that is struck with anyone has to at least pay homage to the idea that the Palestinians should be able to control their own territory. But the next generation down, led by Mohammed bin Salman, who's a millennial, is like, yeah, whatever, that's your problem, old man. The Palestinians have never done anything for us. Gaza is an open air prison camp. Even if we wanted to do something with it, we couldn't with all of our money. So just let it rot and let's cut a deal with the power that matters, and that's Israel. And that will usher in a new Middle East where we lead the entire Arab world against Iran. Now, that might be a little over optimistic, but it's not ridiculous. So, what's going on in Riyadh right now is the older generation, which includes the king, and the younger generation, which includes the king apparent,
Mhm.
are fighting about it. And we will know within a month who comes out on top based on what the Saudi position is versus Iran and Hamas. TBD.